Hey guys, it's Nikki here. I'm here today to give you my VBC review on A Psalm for the Wild Built. At the beginning of the month, I definitely said it was going to be for The Midwife and the Assassin. Then I realized that that is like the fourth book in a series, and I did not want to start in the middle of the series, so I picked something else that was sitting on my TBR, that was nice, and going to be a quick read for me this month. This is only the second Becky Chambers book I have read. I really enjoyed I'm a Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, so I was really excited to pick this up. I didn't really know much other than that Becky Chambers wrote this going into it, so I kind of knew it was going to be a very kind of wholesome sci-fi book, but I wasn't entirely sure what else it would entail other than that there's a robot and a monk, because that's in the synopsis and on the cover. The plot of the story itself is very sweet. These two individuals meet, they form an unlikely kind of like relationship, and it was just very sweet and wholesome, and I just really connected to it, especially Dex's struggles. The struggles that they're going through really hit home with me, and there was something I really related to, and it definitely made this book feel like I picked it up at the right time kind of read. I really enjoyed Mosscap's kind of background and the way that Mosscap interacted with Dex. The progression of the story was kind of interesting because it progressed the way, like, in the direction I thought it would, but not necessarily the way I thought it would. It was, for me, a bit of a jumpy start. You kind of have a cold open to Dex previous to when the story takes place, and you kind of get a little bit of background on them. Compared to the rest of the book, it was slightly differently paced, and I wasn't sure how much I was going to enjoy it going forward, just because given how the beginning is set up, I wasn't sure if that was the kind of story I wanted to read, at this time anyways. But after you catch up to the present day story, the progression and the pacing picks up a little bit, and I ended up really enjoying the speed with which the story progressed, the way the story progressed just in terms of like obstacles and overcoming them. Next, I'm going to talk about the characters. I'm really going to only talk about the two main ones, Mosscap and Dex. I really enjoyed both of them. Dex is a non-binary monk who decides to take up a different trade within the monk world, and that's kind of where you meet them. And then Mosscap is a robot, and the robot's kind of left humanity at one point, so it's a very interesting interactions between Dex and Mosscap, just because they've never really interacted with the other's kind before. I really enjoyed, as I mentioned, Dex's struggles and just kind of their internal struggles, and I enjoyed the way that they impacted the way the story went and kind of how it impacted the drive and motivations of the characters. And it really just, like I said, it really just hit home for me. It was really kind of comforting to know that other people think that way. And from here I'm going to move right into two likes and two dislikes to kind of give you an idea whether or not, beyond what I've already said, whether or not this will be a book for you. The first like is I enjoyed the world that was built. Although I saw a lot of criticism about it saying it's too optimistic, it's too sweet, it's too wholesome. I really found it to be that those things really touched with me, because it was kind of, it gave you a little bit of hope and optimism because of how that world worked out. The second positive is just going to be a reiteration of Dex and their internal struggles. I really can't emphasize enough how much that made the story for me because of how well I connected to it. And then on to my two dislikes. The first negative is I wish we had a little bit more interaction with the world, specifically through Dex and their new duties as a tea monk. Just because I feel like jumping from past Dex to present Dex, that there's a little bit that we missed that could have really filled in the story in terms of like motivations and just general feelings and personality. And my other negative was just, it's pretty minor, but I did find Mosscap's voice to be very similar to Dex's. And not necessarily in a negative way, but just in a way that made Mosscap not necessarily feel like what you would expect a robot to be like. That being said, that's kind of how the robot, his character, is set up in the book. But at first it was really off-putting, or not off-putting, at first it was very hard to get into, simply because it wasn't what you expected. And now I'm just going to do a quick wrap up here. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I fully intend to pick this up again before the end of the year, which gives me about a month. And it may not stay as a 5 out of 5 best, one of my favorite books of all time forever, but this was definitely the right book at the right time. It was the read I needed in the mind space I'm in right now. There's just so much to love about it. Mosscap and Dex's friendship, Dex's outlook at struggles, Mosscap's optimism and goals, the way the world is set up, and there's so much growth potential just with that world and how they can move forward from this book. My likes and dislikes really were skewed in favor of the likes very strongly. The dislikes were pretty minor and things that I think other readers would find annoying more so than I vehemently disliked them. So I take it as you will. I'm a big fan of this. And now with the wrap up out of the way, I'm going to move into my 100% spoiler section, and that is my typical 6 kind of book club questions that I like to answer about all the books I read for these videos. So this is your last warning. These are spoiler answers. Please leave if you're not feeling it. The first question is, what is your initial reaction? My initial reaction was like excitement, simply because I like Becky Chambers, and although I wasn't super keen on the pacing and how much of Dex's background we got, simply because I thought it was going to be set up for a different kind of struggle than we got. But I was just pumped because it started off and had that cozy feeling, and that's what I was really looking for. 2, what is your favorite chapter or scene? I actually really liked at the end when they got to the Hermitage and Mosscap and Dex kind of had their interactions there, and Mosscap did the beautiful little like tea monk setup for Dex. It was so fitting and sweet and really wrapped up the story arc really nicely. How did the characters change throughout the story? Both of your characters changed quite a bit, just in terms of Mosscap learning about humans, learning a little bit about themselves, and kind of comparing humans to robots and trying to move forward with that. And the same with Dex, oppositely, you know, humans versus robots, what's different, what's the same. But then also just Dex's internal struggles really were highlighted really well by using a lot of physical obstacles, and it really resonated with me, and the growth is this growth is one of the things I liked so much. 4, how did you like the ending? Well, given that it was my favorite chapter or scene, I'd have to say I liked it pretty dang well. Question 5, would you read another book by this author? As I mentioned, I already have read another book by this author, but this book has sealed the deal for me in terms of continuing to read Becky Chambers. And then question 6, what other books does this remind you of? In terms of tone, the only other book I've read that it reminds me of is the other Becky Chambers book I read. However, the setup is somewhat similar to, I think it's called Gears and Sea, and the name of the author is escaping me. She's Canadian. I'll find it and put it on screen here. Although that is much more of a middle grade book, and it isn't a perfect one-to-one transition, but the tone is the same, and like the role of robot and friendships is very similar. But other than that, I haven't really read that much that's similar. And I'm going to leave you here and see you guys in the next video. Peace.